Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate this opportunity to brief the Security Council on this symbolic day in Colombia, dedicated each year to the victims of the armed conflict. They should always be at the center of our efforts to build peace in Colombia and elsewhere. I welcome the presence today of Minister of Foreign Affairs, Luis Gilberto Murillo, and express once again my appreciation for the continued support of the government of Colombia to the work of the verification mission. I also welcome today the participation of Ms. Marcela Sanchez from the NGO Colombia Diversa, which gives visibility to the impact of conflict on women and LGBTI persons and their important role as peace builders. I would also like to recognize the attendance today of Roberto Vidal, President of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, and recognize his leadership into at this important moment of the jurisdiction. Madam President, distinguished members of the Council, Colombia has reached an important juncture in relation to its ambitions of implementing the 2016 peace agreement and of advancing its ongoing dialogue initiatives. As the Security Council was able to observe firsthand during its recent visit, there is a deep desire for peace in Colombia that extends from highest levels of government and state institutions across civil society and to vulnerable communities in the regions still afflicted by conflict. The key challenge for transforming that aspiration into reality is to channel the abundant political will and impressive drive of civil society into ever more tangible dividends of peace on the ground. This effort will require Colombians to overcome divisions in an effort that should unite them across the political spectrum based on a common interest in securing a peaceful future. Señora Presidenta, distinguidos miembros del Consejo. El sistema de justicia transicional establecido en el acuerdo es un testimonio de la confianza construida por las partes en su momento para resolver un conflicto armado que afectó a Colombia durante casi medio siglo. El sistema tiene un equilibrio delicado cuyo sostenimiento es fundamental para cumplir con el principio de centralidad de las víctimas y lograr la anhelada transición hacia la paz. Como parte de este sistema, la Comisión de la Verdad desempeñó un papel esencial en el esclarecimiento de la verdad histórica sobre el conflicto, complementado por el mandato de la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz, enfocada en investigar los casos más emblemáticos y representativos del conflicto, los patrones asociados a los crímenes más graves, así como en sancionar a los máximos responsables de llevarlos a cabo. La responsabilidad de la JEP está intrínsecamente relacionada con el tránsito de una situación de guerra a una situación de paz. Esta es una tarea de importancia monumental que exige ponderar múltiples elementos: rigurosidad con celeridad, así como los derechos de las víctimas y la seguridad jurídica de quienes comparecen ante la jurisdicción, honrando así los compromisos adquiridos bajo el acuerdo. La autonomía e independencia para la toma de decisiones han sido fundamentales para que la JEP haya llevado a cabo su mandato y lo seguirán siendo. Su marco, por otra parte, se encuentra determinado en los equilibrios establecidos por las partes en el acuerdo y formalizados en la ley. Quisiera saludar que la JEP se está acercando cada vez más a la emisión de sus primeras sanciones. Las víctimas requieren que esto se realice sin mayor dilación. Y ante las dificultades recientes, aprovecho esta oportunidad para hacer eco del llamado del Secretario General a todos los actores involucrados para propiciar las mejores condiciones posibles para este momento culminante y tan esperado Todo esto a través de un diálogo constructivo, a fin de superar obstáculos y encontrar soluciones dentro del marco del acuerdo. Los colombianos y las colombianas nos han dado múltiples ejemplos de resolver sus conflictos a través del diálogo. Confío en que esta no será la excepción. Madam President, while thousands of former FARC-EP members who laid down their weapons in good faith have stood by their commitments as per the agreement, the need for concrete and sustainable progress in its implementation has become ever more pressing with time. In this regard, I recommend a better use of the architecture for the implementation of the agreement, including the Commission for the follow-up, promotion, and verification of the implementation of the final agreement, CCB. In addition, I call upon the government to finalize the legal instruments to allow the swift implementation of the comprehensive reintegration program, as well as the national reintegration system, in order to provide these men and women with certainty and consolidate their transition into civilian life. Security also constitutes a key component of the reintegration of the former combatants and continues to be of the utmost concern. Regrettably, 11 more ex-combatants have been killed since the last report was issued. And as the Security Council heard repeatedly during its recent visit, social leaders, as well as entire communities, particularly indigenous and Afro-Colombians, still suffer the full impact of persisting violence and the limited presence of state institutions in various regions. In my recent visits to Cauca, Valle del Cauca, and Norte de Santander, this call for security was a common plea from ethnic groups, local authorities, civil society, as well as the private sector. The election last month of a new Attorney General, Luz Adriana Camargo, provides an opportunity to investigate and prosecute with renewed vigor those responsible for crimes against former combatants and social leaders. I met recently with her, and I was encouraged that her immediate priorities include the strengthening of the Special Investigation Unit created by the agreement, as well as broader efforts to combat the criminal structures responsible for the violence. Señora Presidenta, distinguidos miembros del Consejo, los actuales ceses al fuego bilaterales constituyen un paso importante para la construcción de confianza en las negociaciones y la reducción de violencia en el país. Sin embargo, estos no sustituyen las políticas de seguridad por parte del Estado destinadas a proveer protección y bienestar a las comunidades afectadas por el conflicto. Por el contrario, estos esfuerzos deben ser complementarios. Muchas de estas políticas están contempladas en el acuerdo, tales como la política de desmantelamiento de grupos armados o la política de defensa del gobierno, con su enfoque de seguridad humana. Confío en que se avance en su implementación sin mayor dilación. En un contexto desafiante para la mesa de diálogo, con algunas divergencias significativas para resolver entre las partes, el Gobierno y el Ejército de Liberación Nacional, se reunirán esta semana en Caracas, Venezuela. En esta oportunidad, espero que se pueda evaluar la implementación de lo acordado hasta la fecha y se tomen decisiones para avanzar en la agenda pactada en el Acuerdo de México. Confío en que las partes, con un firme apoyo de la comunidad internacional, sabrán sobreponerse a las dificultades de la coyuntura actual y reafirmar a la sociedad colombiana el compromiso de la Mesa Nacional por llegar a acuerdos definitivos con beneficios tangibles para las comunidades. En cuanto a los diálogos entre el Gobierno y el grupo conocido como EMC, insto a las partes a mantenerse enfocadas en resolver sus diferencias en la mesa de conversaciones, a pesar de las dificultades actuales, teniendo en cuenta la oportunidad única que se presenta actualmente para contribuir a un futuro distinto. Para lograrlo, es esencial se construyan sobre los avances obtenidos hasta ahora y den muestras claras de su voluntad de paz. Toda hostilidad en contra de la población civil manda el mensaje contrario. Erosiona la confianza entre las partes y de la sociedad, como evidenciaron los condenables hechos de violencia contra la población indígena en Cauca, que llevaron a la suspensión parcial del cese al fuego por parte del Gobierno Nacional. Distinguished members of the Council, a roadmap for dealing with some of the structural causes of conflict in Colombia was laid out in the first chapter of the Agreement on Rural Reform. It aims to resolve, amongst other matters, the historical inequities of land tenure that have endured for decades. Among its priorities are the distribution, formalization, and restitution of land, as well as the delivery of public goods and services to rural Colombia. While there is still a long way to go to meet the ambitious goals of the peace agreement, the Secretary General in his report recognizes significant increases in budget allocations and efforts of the current government to deliver land and resolve land-related conflicts. A continuous drive to implement these provisions, backed with substantial investments and the coordinated engagement of all relevant ministries and state institutions, is needed to overcome inequalities that have long fueled cycles of violence in the countryside. Similarly, the agreement's ethnic chapter and gender provisions seek to address the long-standing exclusion and disproportionate impact of the conflict on indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities, as well as on women and LGBTQ persons. I look forward to concrete results towards the goal of achieving 60% of implementation of the ethnic chapter by 2026. I also trust that the soon-to-be-launched National Action Plan for Security Council Resolution 1325 will help further the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda in the country. It will be important to ensure overall coherence between the plan and the gender provisions of the agreement. Furthermore, the principles of the plan regarding women's participation and the crafting of agreements that account for the gender dimensions of conflict and peace building should be duly considered and reflected in ongoing dialogue initiatives with armed groups. Madam President, distinguished members of the Council, the visit by the Council in February was an expression of support for the creative and courageous efforts underway in Colombia. I am certain that the visit provided much-needed encouragement to all sectors of society to persevere in their struggle for peace. However difficult and demanding of patience, Colombia's decision to prioritize dialogue as a principal means to resolve conflicts sets the country apart as a model that is more relevant than ever in today's world. I trust that this Council will echo our calls to encourage all actors in Colombia to redouble their efforts to implement the 2016 peace agreement and to pursue dialogue as a way to further consolidate peace in the country. I thank you, Madam President.